Call to order the Wheeling Plan Commission for Thursday, October 18th, 2012. Please stand for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Secretary, please call the roll.
Surely. Commissioner Schaaf gave prior notice that he would not be in attendance. Commissioner Burns. Here. Commissioner Dorban.
Here. Commissioner
Johnson.
Here.
Commissioner Fotto, I'm here. Commissioner Stylen.
Here.
And Chairman Maloney.
Here. Mr. Jennings, are there any changes to the agenda?
There are no changes this evening.
There is no one in the audience, so there'll be no citizens' concerns and comments. We'll go to consent items, docket number SCBA 12-48, American Gas, Welding and Gas, 300 East Sumac Road, appearance approval of a wall sign. This is a company that distributes welding gases. Do I hear a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Please call the roll.
Motion was made by Commissioner Johnson, seconded by Commissioner Fotto. Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Commissioner Fotto, I vote yes. Commissioner Burns?
Yes.
Commissioner Dorban?
Yes.
Commissioner Stylen?
Yes.
And Chairman Maloney?
Yes.
May I just make a comment? I really like the fact that they have given us this diagram of what everything means on the lighting schematic. It really was very interesting. I don't know if you have that, Andrew, or not, but it really is.
Next slide.
I don't have it on this presentation version.
Okay. Very good.
It really is it's a nice cutaway that they provided.
Our next and final thing for the evening, but I'm not going to take a few minutes, it'll be a while, is a discussion of the Village Comprehensive Plan. And we'll turn this over to Mr. Jennings.
One second, please, to set this up. At the request of the commission, and then with the consent of the board at the joint Plan Commission board meeting, staff has put together a review of the comprehensive plan. As we assembled this presentation, I think it became pretty clear that this would probably end up being a two-part discussion. We would view this as being part one of that, obviously, but as we get into it, I'll explain, I think, where we're likely to cut off and leave the commission with some questions and suggestions for leading into the second part of this discussion. So this is going to take probably, I would guess, in the neighborhood of an hour, maybe 45 minutes. I will try to move things along relatively quickly, but feel free to interrupt if you do have questions. I'd rather take them as you have them, I suppose, and see how it goes from there.
Opposed to before I forget them.
Right. So the presentation itself is divided into a couple of different, are you seeing this on your screen as well? Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yes.
The presentation is divided into a few different areas. We're going to go through a summary of the plan, which is going to be the bulk of this this evening. The assessment section is really more of how to assess the plan, assess what is ripe for an update and what may be still valid, and then a discussion of the next steps. On to the first section then. So the first question that I want to cover is why we do this. Why do you have a comprehensive plan? What do we hope to achieve with it? It is really the primary document by which you convey to the public and to other agencies what the vision of the village is and how you think you can go about achieving it. What are the goals in terms of land use, infrastructure, et cetera, and what are the methods that you'd like to achieve those goals. It's used not only by the planners, but it's really useful for all aspects of the village government. And it has, as you'll see, a lot of crossover to districts that are not part of our municipal government as well.
So, okay, so just back there, you said you use it for, it's used in your job, Brooke's job, on a day-to-day basis. So when a petitioner comes in, is your first step to go to the comp plan and see, okay, is this something that fits into the what we're thinking in this area?
That is one of the things. A lot of times we know just from a general land use perspective what the future land use plan says. That, and we get to that part of this presentation. There's a that is probably the most frequently used piece of the plan, the future land use map. When you have your reports in front of you, there's a list of introductory items. One of them is comprehensive plan designation. I think everything except for signs, we include the comprehensive plan designation, and that's what we're referring to is what does the future land use map say about this property?
And Andrew, when you get, I think, further in, can you discuss comprehensive plan versus zoning map and which one and how they may interact with each other?
Sure. If I don't, feel free to stop me, please. The comp plan has several functions. They're listed here. You can use it as a guide for land that can be annexed. By statute, that land can be up to, I think, 1.5 miles outside of the village. Obviously, that is no longer the case. We have annexed, for the most part, everything that can be annexed. It's a guide for the capital improvements division of the Public Works Department. And working with the board to set out the 5-year plan. It's a long-term development guide. It has implications for zoning. You can discuss the character of the public realm, public streets, the character of private development. How do you want specific areas to develop over time? It's got a transportation component, also has natural resource protection, recreational. In our case, because of the overlapping jurisdictions, the recreational is a guide for working with other districts. And goes without saying, but it's a comprehensive plan. It really is the ultimate recognition of the interrelated nature of all of these aspects that make up the village. Before we get into the plan, I just want to spend a moment on the review and update procedure. The comp plan is reviewed. It's under the purview of the Plan Commission. The Plan Commission can make recommendations to the board to update the plan or certain aspects of the plan. The plan is an advisory document. It can be used to provide the framework for implementation through zoning or other actions, but it's an advisory document. It's a very strong advisory document, but it's an advisory document. There is no set horizon for a comprehensive plan. The general rule of thumb is you're looking at a 20-plus year horizon, good 30-year, excuse me. Looking a good 30 years down the road when you're talking about the future land use plan. It's a 30-year build-out. How often a comprehensive plan is updated depends on the growth rate. So if you're experiencing a lot of growth, you may do it within a decade, push it out 15, maybe even 20 years under slower growth conditions. You can update sections of the comprehensive plan as needed. Every couple of years, you can take a look at what might be ripe for an update. We'll talk about that a little bit later on. So the plan if you read through the section of the code about this, the plan actually consists of multiple documents. In the case of Wheeling, there are 3 documents currently that make up the comprehensive plan. The one that most of you probably are familiar with as being the comp plan is the 2003 comp plan. The station area plan is also adopted as an update to the comprehensive plan, as is the recent Town Center Committee plan. So the 2003 comprehensive plan, which is going to be the meat of what we talk about tonight, is generally divided up into these sections. It starts with the broad vision statements, both in terms of topic areas as well as overall land use. It gets into a little bit more specific with the sub-area plans and these character plans, streetscape character suggestions, that sort of thing. Then there are several sections, several chapters that are not necessarily geographic in their orientation. They're broader plans for how the village in general should deal with these different topics. And then there is a implementation section. The first section of the plan really lays out what the village arrived at after the whole public comment section. Those of you who were on the commission at the time, I'm sure will recall the amount of time spent on compiling the vision statement, all the workshop meetings, public hearings, putting it all together. The vision statement then is followed by some trend analysis, which is overall trends for the feeling, commercial trends, housing trends. It's a description. It includes a description of the transportation network. The next section is probably one of the more important sections of the document. There are guiding principles by topic area. The topics are shown on the right. These are, just flip through them, image, residential character, industrial, parks and open space, transportation, these types of topics, and how the village hopes to achieve certain goals within each of those topic areas. Each one, each one has a list of policies that would be, that are identified as the policy that would most likely achieve the goal or objective by topic area. And as we'll cover throughout the presentation, a lot of the policies that were identified have been adopted in some form or are being pursued currently. The first background and analysis section is the land use. It sets up the context for the plan. There's some, not terribly detailed, but there's analysis by each land use category. And one of the interesting things about this section is it compares where we were in 2002 with where we thought we would be in the previous comprehensive plan. So the 1987 plan figures of projected land use are on the right. And you can see how that compared to what was actually found in 2002. There were, these categories were land use categories where there was more land devoted to that particular land use category than was expected. That included multifamily residential, open space, and vacant. I thought it was interesting. This is the planner to see a projected land use of vacant land at 0%. Single family residential, commercial, and industrial all were accounted for less land than was anticipated at the last major comp plan update. The existing land use section, interestingly, covers a lot of territory. There are, the demographic analysis is included here. This is the 2000 census analysis is in this section. The floodplain map is included in this section. There's some economic analysis by industrial sector. So there's a lot actually covered in this section that I wouldn't necessarily categorize as being land use. It is ultimately what makes up the planning framework for the village. It's the snapshot in 2002 of what is the village of Wheeling. Fairly interesting. This section also, if you read through it, the tables are often organized in a way that you can compare the village of Wheeling to the adjacent communities. A lot of what we are really familiar with in the comprehensive plan is the sub-area section. The sub-area plans tend to be more detailed in their recommendations. They have more specific guidelines for implementation than the other sections of the plan. So I'll spend a little bit of time on this. The 2003 plan had 5 sub-areas. McHenry Road, Lake Cook, Milwaukee, Dundee, and Wolf Ridge or Wolf Run Estates. What is interesting about it is there are other areas that get what I think is sub-area treatment. They get the same sort of analysis, they get the same sort of recommendations. They aren't necessarily identified as their own sub-area, but there are pretty specific recommendations for a segment of Dundee Road, sort of a corridor analysis. There's a character plan for the town center. There's a Wolf Road plan, which is treated equal to the other sub-areas, though not named as a sub-area. And then there's a Wolf and Milwaukee plan. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on these, but the sub-area plans, here's that Wolf and Milwaukee plan that I was referring to. So the sub-area plans, as you can see, have more detailed recommendations about how the future land use map would be interpreted at a more detailed level. While we're on this one, just point out the red line here is the village boundary. So these were the areas that were not yet annexed. So as I was saying in the beginning, you have the ability in your comprehensive plan to plan out in advance how you would expect development to occur in areas that you have not yet annexed. Yes?
Andrew, I don't know if you're going to say anything about it, but I'd just like to make a comment that the map that you're showing here was representative of what our comprehensive plan looked like back in the 70s and 80s. It was just a map that was color-coded with residential, commercial, whatever, with minimal text describing the areas, whatever. And somewhere along the line, Attorney Rhodes came and said, well, that's good, but it really doesn't give you much impetus for enforcing the changes that you want to see. And that's when we started adding a lot more descriptive text of what our vision really was, not just a yellow color or a pink color or whatever. So would you care to say something about the importance of verbally describing stuff? Jim, were you around here when?
I was not. No, I was not.
Well, just while we're on it, a couple things. The 1987 plan, which we still have, essentially fits on 2 sheets of paper.
One sheet of paper on 2 sides, right?
I can, now that we have a large format color scanner, I should just scan it and let you all see it. In a lot of ways, the idea of comprehensive planning and the techniques certainly have evolved. That being said, I think the 1969, I want to say, plan was probably more detailed and thorough and similar to what you would do today than the 1987 plan was. I can get both of them out and send them around. But it's certainly interesting to see some of the same things repeated. The idea of the municipal campus, to see it repeated decade after decade was really interesting. There's certainly evolution to the idea, but in terms of the value of a plan, what we're taught in school these days, well, I don't know what they're taught in school these days.
What do your kids tell you?
But
McGuffey's planner?
they do teach you a good bit about how to write an effective comprehensive plan, how to put it together, and I can say for our part that I think this is a much more effective document than what you had previously. I'll cover some of this when we talk about assessing the plan and its validity at this point and what's obsolete, what's not. But absolutely, having analysis, detailed logical thought behind a plan certainly makes it it gives you the ability to go back to it. What were we thinking at the moment that we adopted this? What was the intent behind it? The land use map is, of course, the primary symbol of 180 pages of background information. So land use map is very important, but what's behind it is certainly more important, I would say.
Yeah, I think what Attorney Rhodes was trying to tell us back then was that you have a zoning map, and I think up until the last comprehensive plan, our comprehensive plan designation never matched the zoning map designation. So the comprehensive plan would say residential, and the zoning map would say business or commercial or something, vacant land. And there was always that thing of, well, which plan is legally enforceable? And I think what Rhodes was saying, a zoning map is pretty definitive when you only have a comprehensive plan that deals with colors.
Right.
As you start adding more verbiage to it, then it starts to compete with, and is that still true, do you know?
Yeah, I mean, the zoning, if I get what you're asking, I mean, the zoning map is one of the primary tools for implementing the comprehensive plan, and you miss an opportunity to implement the plan if you're not using that tool. And of course, how the village decides to use its power and authority to zone certainly is backed up by the detailed analysis of a comprehensive plan, if that's what you're saying. Just to flip through the other sub-areas briefly, Lake Cook Road, I'm not, like I said, going to spend a lot of time on this. The Dundee Road sub-area, this one's a little bit interesting because of the updates that have been done within it. The Town Center Committee plan being the most recent. The Station Area Plan also effectively updated a sub-area within this sub-area. Then the McHenry Road sub-area, the Wolf Ridge or Wolf Run Estates sub-area. And as I alluded to, there's definitely a relationship to the updates in the sub-areas. So what we actually did when the last update was done, we formally adopted both the 2004 Station Area Plan and the 2010 Town Center Committee Plan. So I'm going to take a brief break from the 2003 plan and go into those very quickly, just because this is in terms of how the plan is organized, this is where they fit in. As you can see here, this is the context of the 2003 sub-areas with the 2004 station area plan within it. So these 3 sub-areas are the sub-areas of the station area plan. I don't know if you were able to spend much time on these in your packet, but the station area plan at the time of the 2003 comprehensive plan, it was known that this was in the works. The village was applying for the RTA grant to do this plan, and you could correct me if I'm wrong, Commissioner Stylen, but I think the village had been awarded at that time, and it was known that this was coming. So the town center plan was, while it was in the comprehensive plan, there was this idea that it was very likely that the station area plan was on its way. The station area plan is a mini comprehensive plan in a way. The analysis is very thorough. It's more specific to this area, but it covers a lot of the same trends, market trends, updated 1 year later, but market trends, housing market analysis, transportation analysis. It is divided into sub-areas, kind of similar to the comprehensive plan. So it's almost like a nesting doll where you get this comprehensive plan for a specific area of Wheeling. More so than the town center committee plan was. This was a very detailed plan. The station sub-area, if you go to this map, this was the red area here. So the easternmost part of the overall station area was right around the station itself. It includes the Wicks property, the area across the tracks. There were one of the interesting features of this was that there were 2 plans for the central sub-area. So this would be the Kmart property here. So there was a plan A and a plan B, if you will. So plan A was to redevelop with most everything intact and find another big box retail for the Kmart site. The plan B was a more wholesale redevelopment of the entire area with the exception of Lynn Plaza, but there was an idea that the village would attempt to redevelop in the short term using the same concept of the Kmart site, but then this was if that does not work out, here's another long-term plan. In the west sub-area also had a sub-area plan leaving Dunhurst Plaza mostly intact with redevelopment of the periphery. And I believe most of you are fairly familiar with this one, the comprehensive plan update that was the Town Center Committee plan. Most of the work undertaken in 2009 and then ultimately approved in January 2010 and I think formally adopted March 2010. It has a land use concept to guide the future development of the property that is owned by the village. There were specific recommendations of features of this plan, and then there was a phasing component based on what was expected to be the likely pattern of redevelopment, what would be most attractive to be built first. Following all of the sub-area plans, you lead into the future land use plan. And as I said before, this is probably the part of the plan we use the most. On just about every zoning action, every petition that involves land use, there's some reference made to what the future land use plan says. Some of the stuff that I think is interesting about this are the sort of hidden features. If you look closely at it, which you can't do at this scale, but There are park sites identified, potential park sites identified. There are greenway corridors identified, new collector streets, which are taken from other parts of the comprehensive plan, and they overlay them onto this map. We also see for the first time in 2003 the idea of mixed use as a type of land use, distinct from retail or residential. There's the conscious decision to mix land uses within a given area. This led to the mixed-use zoning districts that were created in 2005.
Andrew,
Yes.
can I just add something there? You know, I think really in my interpretation of the mixed-use designation was one of those things where we thought it could go either way. And we came up with a zoning criteria or comprehensive plan criteria that would allow the character of the area to develop in one or two areas. But the intention, I believe, was once the character was kind of decided that would set the character for the whole wider area, and then we'd come back and work on it. Much like the Westin Hotel property was either going to be residential in character, another option was the hotel, and once that was decided, we were going to come back and set the plan to get rid of the other option, if you will.
Yeah, I think actually it functioned both ways. You know, as you said, with sort of there's different ways that this area could develop. We're not entirely sure which way it's going. The Westin, I think, being a good example of that. I think there was also, you take the town center area, the idea was certainly to mix uses within a site, have the ability, try to encourage residential and commercial to be very close to one another, if not directly on top of one another. But yeah, I would agree with that. That there, if you read through the sub-area plans, there are certainly ones, especially farther out, where the idea was, you know, a variety of things would be appropriate here, and as you said, you know, it allowed for either way, either type of development to occur. Any other questions on this?
But
Yes.
have we ever, in a mixed-use area, have we ever gone back to change the zoning?
Well, sort of. The original 2005 rezoning, where we introduced the concept of mixed-use zoning, there was a concern on one of the, actually two of the areas there that we had designated with this commercial residential mixed use, which was, for the most part, a combination of the B3 district, which is our most widely used commercial district, and then the R4 district, which is our the multifamily residential district. So the MXC is basically a combination of those two things. After we designated a couple of areas, MXC, there was a concern among the industrial land uses in two of those areas that the zoning wasn't flexible enough to allow them to keep operating, to sell their property to somebody similar to them. So we added a new mixed-use designation, the MXI, which also allowed for light industrial use. I think that is the only one where we've gone back and actually changed the zoning.
Okay.
We did have there was a residential rezoning. We had created a industrial area designation based on the comprehensive plan, and banks did not understand it. Once you put an I on a zoning map, the bank will essentially stop looking beyond that point. And there were homeowners in this area who had some difficulty refinancing, selling, et cetera.
I remember that.
So we had to just take the text, the I letter off the map. The code was essentially the same. We just had to take the I off the map and put an R there, even though everything else was the same. Next section of the comprehensive plan are community character recommendations. This is based mostly on the major corridors, so the Dundee corridor, Milwaukee corridor, the Wolf Road corridor. There are recommendations related to the street profile, streetscape. My opinion looking at this is that it effectively creates sub-areas. Some are within another sub-area, in the case of Wolf Road, independent of one of the other sub-areas. The town center concept plan, interestingly enough, is included in this because, if you recall, the very beginning of the plan, one of the policy objectives was character and image, creating an identity of the village of Wheeling through the use of corridor enhancement and the creation of a town center, which is why, although the town center is sort of a sub-area, it also ends up in this community character section of the code, the plan, excuse me.
So what is it, when you talk about streetscape recommendations, corridor-based analysis, so that intrigued me, that second one, the streetscape recommendations. So that's in essence what Commissioner Stein was talking about from an overlay district, because you're in essence creating a sub-area.
The streetscape recommendations in the comprehensive plan are they're a mix of what the village can do within the public realm and a guide for private redevelopment. There are some of the tools that are used there are things like the facade improvement grant program. It's a mix of the public incentive program and private redevelopment. Not necessarily, I wouldn't say not necessarily a overlay in the zoning sense, but you're creating an area, you're saying this particular area has a certain character we want to protect, or it has a certain character that we want to achieve, and here are recommendations toward that goal. There are minimum, things like a minimum street wall, you have a setback, but you also have a build to, that sort of thing. You want to keep the street front and not let buildings get too far away from it. There were recommendations about where to put street trees, how close to the building. I think I have.
Yeah, sidewalks too, I think, were, the zoning code calls for 5-foot wide sidewalks everywhere. The comprehensive plan said in this particular area, and I think that's why down by the new bridge, right, the sidewalks are 10-foot wide, because the comprehensive plan called for that kind of visual impact and use. But, to me, the difference is the zoning code says 5 foot is required. The comprehensive plan says we'd like to have 10 foot. And the purpose, I think, of an overlay is to take that we'd like to have and put it into the zoning code just as an overlay that says, because it's in the zoning code now, we'd really like to have, this character or this aspect.
Okay.
You agree with that kind of, Andrew?
I mean, it's one of the tools. There's a lot of different ways to achieve the desired character. I mean, you can have a special assessment area and have every property owner in that area assessed a certain rate based on the amount of frontage they have. You can achieve your widened sidewalk that way. You can attempt to do it through the zoning, but it's a combination of multiple tools. But there are certainly ways to go about encouraging or requiring the same thing.
Yeah, I think the thing was, at least from what I remember, you don't want to get so technical in the zoning plan or in the zoning ordinances that say this block has to have 10-foot wide sidewalks, this block has to have this other block has to have that. The zoning code is more of a general for the B3, I3 kind of district, and then the comprehensive plan kind of visualize what we would really like to have in those areas. But the zoning code is the law, and the comprehensive plan is a strong wish list. Is that kind of?
Yeah, I mean the comp plan is the vision. It is your, you may have character recommendations that are specifically there to guide your own capital improvement program, not necessarily, the zoning code, saying is one of the tools. Your own capital improvement plan is another tool. You can pay for sidewalks to be wider. There are a bunch of different ways to go about doing it. There's the hybrid. The special service area may have a reduced rate where as the village, pay 100% up front, and everybody else pays back into it over time. They may not pay back that 100%. So, the zoning code, you can use an overlay to make to achieve a certain character. The build to line versus the setback line, sky exposure planes. You can have all kinds of different urban character requirements in a zoning district by using an overlay. The next piece of the plan is a handful of chapters that are not necessarily based in geography. They're more topical. The natural resource plan, I've included the floodplain map here, although it's not actually in this section. There's a lot of discussion of the impacts of the floodplain and mitigation of it, but it actually appears earlier on in the plan. The natural resource, there's not much here. There is some discussion of the value of protecting resources, fairly generic description of how the land is protected already for the most part because it's within the Forest Preserve District. There's some discussion of encouraging protection of wooded lots outside of the Forest Preserve District, but it's not particularly detailed. There is a small piece of this section devoted to the ability to use zoning, creating a floodplain overlay to protect floodplain and as a symbol of to developers that will have an impact on the ability to develop. It's also a brief section on disaster response and recovery and other mitigation strategies for floodplain development. The transportation plan is relatively short as well. It creates a hierarchy of the streets with the strategic regional arterials here in red. The other major arterials in blue. Slightly difficult to see this orange, but you've got collector streets identified as well. One thing that's sort of hidden on this are future collector streets. There are a couple identified, this bright green. There's a Wyland Road extension and a new street here. So this Wyland Road extension is what the Cook County Highways have been working on with the Lake County over the last couple of years. And then there was a projection of a couple different potential connector roads.
You mentioned the term collector street. I'm not familiar with that term.
Most of these roads that are not colored are considered local. They have no particular
value to get someplace?
They have no, they don't, they tend to serve the residents, the businesses in a smaller area. The collector streets will be sort of where the local roads feed into collector streets to take you to one of the arterials in the hierarchy.
Can I add you always wanted to know, but for Anthony and Lexington, you notice they have yellow lines or white dashed lines down the streets. Anthony, one of the few streets that I know of in town that has
Yes, yeah.
it's a collector street. That collector streets have that crazy.
Wow.
I don't know.
So there's a piece of trivia for you.
I don't know what, I'm not sure exactly what happened with Strong, but it is not designated as a collector east of Wolf for some reason. I'm not sure why that would be. There's also a bicycle and pedestrian pathway plan. We're, as I'm sure you're well aware, in the middle of a major overhaul of this section of the code. A lot of the ideas and the themes are the same. The methodology is entirely different, but the idea of connecting neighborhoods to each other and to parks, schools, library, et cetera, employment centers, the idea behind it is the same. Some of the policy recommendations, a lot of through the effort of Commissioner Boehm when he was here, some of that got implemented into the zoning code. Bike parking, minimum bike parking standards, minimum numbers for bike parking, that was implemented already, and this will probably be either this or the Southeast TIF will be the next formal adoption into this code, into the plan, excuse me. So used to saying code. There's the end of the transportation section includes public transit and what they refer to as the other. So this is the airport and rail freight. They talk about the implications for the industrial areas by their proximity to the rail freight line. The airport section is very brief, not much devoted to this, other than to mention that most neighborhoods, most locations do not have significant access to public transit, and therefore personal vehicles are required for most residents. Next section was the housing plan. There's a interesting comparison of occupancy, owner occupancy, renter occupied, and vacancy. There's summaries of the housing characteristics, the age, value of the units. The end result of that is this fairly lengthy discussion of the barriers to providing so-called move-up units. So Wheeling having a lot of multifamily housing, and then a lot of homes in the, I'm trying to think of the term that they used in the comprehensive plan, but that the next level of house to move out of an apartment and a condo up into a larger home. The Wheeling, when you compared it to the adjacent communities, there was obviously a disproportionately low number of these move-up units. And there's this discussion of the barriers to providing it, which included things like the soil conditions, lot sizes, et cetera. And there were some strategies provided to overcome those barriers, and some of those have actually been employed. The changes to the R3 district we wrote a R3A district that covers a lot of the lots that are referred to in this plan as being substandard in the old zoning code. The economic development plan has just an overview of the stability of the market in Wheeling, the growth of each sector. Talks about some of the strengths, the industrial base, the retail areas. There's a description of some of the economic development programs that the village employs, and most of which we still employ, the TIF districts, the 6B property tax incentive. There is a sort of footnote here that the county and the state and other economic development, the economic development departments of the other bodies of government look for the comprehensive plan to be developed and adopted in a certain way. The Village of Wheeling followed that framework and is therefore eligible for state, county programs. I don't think that I think there's probably most communities who go through the comprehensive planning process would be eligible, but this was noted specifically in that.
What's the driver to update these tables?
What is the driver?
Yeah.
I would imagine that the Economic Development Department has a pretty good idea on an annual basis. You're saying to update them into the plan itself?
Mm-hmm.
Perception of change in development pattern, significant growth, significant vacancy, new market sectors coming into the area that you didn't previously have. I don't think there's a science as much to an art for that.
And census can provide a lot of that kind of data as well.
I was just going to ask that same question based on the housing. Can we go back to that slide? Would the 2010 census have more updated information on this as well?
Yes.
I mean, because we're showing this is 10 years ago. I mean, from that census. So, I mean, that whole...
They only happen every 10 years.
Well, no, what I'm saying is this was 2000, it says here. So the census was done in 2010, so this is already old. I mean, even based on that.
But the census data probably isn't even complete yet, right? I mean, it takes a couple of years for...
This level of analysis from the census is available. I guess the question, and you know, we can certainly provide the update by going through the census tables ourselves. The question is, knowledge of that statistic does not necessarily mean you need to update the plan. Having the 2010 information to compare, very useful. We can absolutely do it. It doesn't necessarily mean that that's going to translate into an update of the plan, though. The flip side of that would be you take a look at the numbers and something that you had not anticipated has happened in that decade. You have a trend that you were really not expecting that is clear in the numbers. You may need to adjust the plan for something like that.
And in that same line, probably you can tell me 6 years ago when they changed the floodplain map for the village, was that about 6 years ago or so?
In 2006, 2007, I think we actually formally adopted the new panel.
Is that a significant change that maybe we should have updated the comprehensive plan with that map change at least?
That's one of the, about 10 slides from now, that's one of the things that we're just going to talk about.
Because it really affects everything, right?
When you're assessing what is still valid and what isn't valid anymore, that's one of the things that you're definitely going to assess is regulatory change. What that did essentially was change the development regulations for large sections of the town. Again, it gets kind of into the same question of the housing. Having that knowledge, you may not necessarily update anything. The zoning may be in place that you need it already. What you do with that knowledge, maybe you look at it and say, we are already covered. The plan already covers this. I think that's one of the points for the assessment, which is going to be the next step of this, is what has changed that may or may not require an update. And you know, maybe some of these things, although significant, may have already built into them either the safety net or the regulation that addresses the issue. Because so many of the community facilities are provided by other taxing bodies, the section of the comprehensive plan on this is fairly vague. It acknowledges the need to coordinate and cooperate with the other districts. Not very much, despite the fact that fire is a village department, there's not very much on the water, sewer, fire in terms of strategies or room for improvement. The implementation section, the last section of the comprehensive plan, is divided into two categories of implementation strategies. The first being zoning, implementing the concepts listed throughout the plan as being addressed through these landscape regulations, the amendments to the single-family districts that we covered. They recommended the creation of a floodplain overlay district and a public land district. There's also a list of some of the potential capital improvements to achieve the objectives of the plan. Flood hazard mitigation, some of which is going on right now. The flood map revision by regulatory change, it becomes a flood hazard mitigation implementation. Go ahead.
Yeah, in your last slide, can you back up one? Is it easy to do? When you said the community facilities and sewer and water and stuff don't get addressed too much, but in reality they do, because if we say we're going to designate an area for commercial development or residential development, and that has no sewer or water capabilities, which means that the site is going to be very difficult to develop, then that's where the capital improvement plan comes in to say, can we get water and sewer closer to those areas to help spur those kinds of developments? So I mean, they do kind of intermix.
They intermix. I think what I mean by this is that in a community that is expecting significant growth, this section of the plan would be much more significant. There would be maybe even a strategic plan within this section that says this area of town will have this water service and this sewer service. We'll extend it from here to here. It will be 1 mile long. It'll have there may, in a town that is expecting a major growth area that's otherwise, agricultural or something, this section of the plan may be much more detailed. Probably 20 minutes. Do you want to break for a minute, or you guys want to plow through?
We'll take a 10-minute break.
Plow through.
Plow through?
Plow through.
Plowing through then.
Sorry?
I think we should plow through.
Go ahead.
We're plowing
We're on a
through.
roll.
Assessing the plan. The next step, I think, in the effort here would be to try to come up with some methods of assessing what may be ripe for a revision. I think for the most part, what is happening right now, the Southeast TIF District effort and the bike and pedestrian plan effort are taking care of a lot of the things that do need to be updated, and they're going to have some impacts when they come out. So a lot of what I'm about to go over is sort of general, just not specific to the Wheeling Comprehensive Plan. So there are factors that are going to determine whether or not a plan is still useful and valid. Interestingly, I was reading the CMAP report on comprehensive plans in the Chicago area, so within the CMAP planning area. They have I don't know, every 3 or 4 years they do an analysis of how valid are people's comp plans, how valid are municipalities' comp plans, and by the measure of growth, the age of the plan, et cetera. And the last two they did, they found that, whatever it is, 20% of municipalities have a plan that hasn't been updated since 1970. 10% have a plan that's 1980 or newer. They break it down, and then they assess how valid they are. And it was interesting to see that the percentage of valid plans hasn't changed a whole lot.
Really?
And the percentage of plans that haven't been updated hadn't changed a whole lot. So it seems, what I would take away from that is there's this cycle, the growth cycle. Communities are updating them as they need to, so that across the region, all the numbers seem to be about the same, even though the growth is occurring in other places. So factors that are going to help determine this. Development that wasn't previously anticipated. Sometimes things happen that you don't expect. The private market does something you weren't anticipating, and the scale is large enough that it actually causes a spillover. You expect other development near it to be of a new character because you weren't expecting something to happen. Reuse of existing buildings. This is something we've seen a good deal of. Industrial buildings that are being repurposed. Market changes. For example, the rise of the big box retail store and its evolution, if you will. Consumer preferences. People's preference to shop from home, have their groceries delivered. These things change the way that land is used. The percentage of land that is dedicated to certain types of stores shifts over time. Consumer preferences in the housing market. People have a preference for lot sizes that changes. People want more house on a smaller lot. Some people want more house on a big lot. And over time, I'd say, especially in this area, you've seen the house size to lot size ratio go up. Cost of gas, the distance that people are willing to travel changes. Shift into green building changes how you might plan for an area. We were trying to think of an example of an industrial sector change. Came up with hospitals shifting toward inpatient care, shifting away from inpatient care, causing more smaller outpatient facilities scattered. So you have a new player in your real estate market. You've got medical offices who previously would have been grouped together in larger hospitals. Infrastructure improvements can determine, you have a corridor extension like the one that's being discussed right now down south. The land near that is going to get very expensive in a couple of years. So congratulations if you own something down there. But these types of things really change land use patterns. Regulatory changes, floodplain boundary changes, MWRD changing its regulations on minimum lot size that requires on-site stormwater detention. These things are going to have an impact on how businesses use land, how residential developers use the land. This could also be the evolution of the vision. The village has an idea of a town center. 20 years down the road, you may have an idea that the town center is a different place. Not specific to Wheeling, obviously, but these things do change over time. Next one is a little bit interesting. Lack of redevelopment activity. You try something, you try the comp plan one way, you try all the implementation is there, everything that you think is required to result in a certain type of development is there. It just does not happen. And through lack of redevelopment, you end up with the evolution of a collective vision. You go back to the drawing board and say, well, what else might work here? Reevaluation of the sub-area plans. Is the geographic sub-area plan effective? And then access to information, the census updates. You learn things about the community that are changing and evolving. Examples of that could be the preference with respect to the size of the family, the size of the house is related to that. Where am I on this one?
Yep, Andrew,
Yes.
you know, we recently had the Southeast TIF plan. Would that was Industrial Lane and a couple other Tower Road and down in that area. While that wasn't a sub-area in our plan necessarily, would that become another sub-area type overlay that's actively being pursued?
I think you could look at it sort of similar to the station area plan. You have in that case, it was a pretty significant overlap, but the Southeast TIF overlaps with the Milwaukee Avenue sub-area. There's a little bit of it that's outside of it, but I would view that as an update to the south end of the Milwaukee Avenue. And that is kind of what we're getting at here, is the sub-area size appropriate? The Milwaukee Avenue corridor is perhaps needs to be broken down into a south, a central, and a north. There may be ways to approach the plan differently. Annexed areas, in this case, we have some that have been annexed. Has the development occurred there as you would have expected? Take a look at the sub-area plan. Is the character that was expected achieved? Is the sub-area size appropriate? Occasionally things change in land assembly. A developer assembles land, you didn't anticipate it. A government agency, park district, forest preserve district picks up land that you had envisioned to be developable. It is the concept for that changes completely if a large agency like that purchases land. Just as an example, and this would be very brief, an example in the assessment to give sort of the guidance for this next step. If you take a look at this first section of the comprehensive plan, this is a repeat of a slide from the beginning. There are guiding principles to achieve a vision for the village. Each one of those principles had policies under it, and I'm just giving you the example of the image. When you're assessing comprehensive plan, you can look back to these goals. Are you, through this plan, does the framework of this plan, do the implementation recommendations in this plan still address the vision that we had? And for image, these are the objectives. There's overall image, promoting a family-friendly village, celebrating its diversity, promoting the value of the existing facilities. There were general objectives for the character of the arterial streets, gateway enhancements, redeveloping obsolete commercial strips, introduction of bike lanes and bike routes on the arterial streets, burying utilities to change the character of the streets. I won't read all these, but so while there are implementation concepts in the implementation section of the code, there are some fairly specific, some of the objectives have some pretty specific policy directions in the beginning of the code, in the beginning of the plan as well. So one method of assessing would be, as you go through each of those, however many, what do we have, 10 topics, you can take a look at the policies. Have these policies been achieved? Are we in the process of achieving these policies? As you go through them, I would say that a lot of them, the answer is going to be yes. They have been, they are either adopted or they're in process of being adopted. So just one thing to think about while assessing it. Again, on deciding what to update, recent development activity. Have there been developments that this one is done, it's either what was expected or wasn't was expected? Does it change anything with respect to the sub-area plan or the future land use plan? Again, the annexed areas. All of that, I guess, leads into the next step. I think taking into account the impact of the plans that we are currently working on, because there will be some impact to the comprehensive plan. Doing an assessment of the current status of the plan. Answering those questions for the sub areas, answering the questions for the topical areas. And then, are there other tools that weren't really trendy at the time of the comprehensive plan that may be more maybe known about them now? So the new urbanism as a trend in zoning. Are there things that weren't anticipated or weren't widely used that may be useful? And that is it.
So, what are you planning on for part two?
I think it will be homework for the commission, probably. The assessment of the plan. We'll set it up to guide it. I think, obviously from a planning professional's standpoint, we have ideas about where to go. I think what we'll do is try to get the commission to come up with ideas, and we'll have a discussion rather than just determine. I think that part of it is the open discussion of the assessment, and that's what we'll probably facilitate next.
When do you have that scheduled?
I don't have a date. I would say within, it would be the next.
Maybe
it takes some prep. It does take a little prep time.
I understand. That's why I'm asking.
So, within the next couple months.
Okay. What do you want us to do in the meantime?
In the meantime, I would say I can get you this presentation. I can get you the questions, the assessment questions, trying to determine what's valid, what's not valid. And I think Ms. Jones and I can spend a little time taking a look at the census, see if we can package the table. I think one really important aspect of this, though, is the two plans. You're on the verge of public hearings for two updates to the comprehensive plan. They have, if you go back to the goals and objectives, there are things that relate to bike and pedestrian planning that are part of streetscape. There's the idea of pedestrian refuge islands. It's part of other parts of the comp plan. So I think having those in hand and going through the plan, I think would be a really good next step.
Thank you very much. You put a lot of work into this. Comments, Jim?
Question on your last slide. You say you alluded to new zoning trends. No, you had it up there.
Oops, sorry.
You alluded to new zoning trends, but what type of what type of tools? What do you mean by tools? What are you talking about there?
A couple of weeks ago, I sent you all a document with the description of the OV1 district.
Yes.
There was another document in there with that memo that was a discussion of some of the land use zoning techniques that are out there. Mm-hmm. There's incentive zoning that, for the most part, we don't really use. Increasing the number of units based on a developer's ability to provide you other attractive features. A good example of that would be you provide pseudo public space. You take a you take a development that's at the intersection of two major streets, you provide a public plaza on it, you get a height bonus for doing something like that. So there's ways to use zoning that we can explore that we haven't explored. Okay. And that's what that is. You know, are there unique, is there a place in Wheeling where a new type of district previously not contemplated might be appropriate?
Okay. All right, thank you.
Don?
No, I have no questions.
Mr. Burns?
Nothing, Mr. Chairman. Nothing from me.
I'm sorry. I thought I heard thank you. And Ms. Dorban?
Nothing, thank you.
Mr. Stylen?
Just a question for Andrew. You know, Camrose did a lot of the mapping stuff. Did you get their original stuff, or if we do it, are you going to have to redo all this stuff just to make a simple change?
Technology is very different than it was in 2002. We have the ability to update things. I mean, even if they didn't provide us, which they for the most part did not provide us the originals. Well, we have our images, but we have our IT division has a GIS professional who we work with pretty regularly. So both Ms. Jones and I have the ability to update graphics. We also have a very powerful tool in our tool belt by having a GIS professional on staff. Well, he's a consultant who's effectively here, I would say 3 or 4 days a week.
Just would have been a lot easier had you had the original stuff. You might have been able to cut and paste a little bit easier. But a lot of it, the speed at which a lot of it can be redone is I think might surprise you. We can redo a lot of these things. The current land use, the future land use could probably be redone within a matter of a day or two. I mean, it's not that significant.
Good. Thank you. A lot of work.
Nice job.
Yep. Other business, Mr. Stylen.
No, I don't have anything. Thank you.
Commissioner Dorband?
Nothing, thank you.
Commissioner Raffato?
Yes, I do. Just a heads up that I will not be in attendance for the next two meetings, October 25th and November 8th. And, you know, when you're speaking about, Andrew, when you're talking about, you know, the next meeting, I think we only have 2 meetings in November. Because it's five Thursdays. And one of those Thursdays is Thanksgiving. So, and then my last thing is, when we last talked about updating our iPads to iOS 6, have you heard anything? I mean, can we?
Is it safe?
Is it safe? Well, yeah, I mean, I haven't seen anything except for, you know, terrible reviews on the map application, but we don't use that. And
No, I haven't heard anything new.
okay, all right. That's all I have. Thank you.
You can always download the Google.
Yeah, I know, yeah.
Commissioner
Well,
Johnson?
I don't use
I
it
have
anymore.
And Commissioner Burns?
Nothing.
Anything else?
I do have a
Yes, sir.
couple quick ones. We met with the owners of D'Agostino's. They requested that the sign, once they installed the new panel, with the exception of some of the age of the paint, they liked the way that it looked with the green, and they requested that we just leave it with the green and you know, touch up the green instead of go to the black. It was originally, well, not originally, but the what was ultimately approved was this design on the right, and they'd like to keep it with the green and just refresh the green paint. Are there any issues? Does anyone have a major concern with that?
No,
I have no problem.
no, it looks nice. Are they open?
They are open.
Sweet.
Anything else?
I have one other question. Inland Die Casting was just approved for their outdoor storage area here, was approved with a cyclone fence with privacy slats in it, vinyl inserts. They met with a fence company, and the fence company had suggested using treated lumber as opposed to the vinyl inserts. So they're now proposing this as a wood fence. Is there any objection to them going with a wood fence?
I'd prefer it.
Trouble is, I mean, as soon as somebody bumps into a wood fence, it's going to break as opposed to give and take, right? Are they going to be keeping the fence? You know, is there any, do we have an ordinance that says they must keep their fence in a reasonable state of repair?
The general property maintenance. I think one thing that we can, as a staff, we can talk to them about is protection on the inside, you know, so that you may not see it from the outside, but put some bollards up so that they have the heavy metal wireframe crates. I think that if we protect from the inside.
All they have to do is put some stoppers there when
Yeah.
they slide them in.
I would be okay with that. At the village board meeting this week, I think this was approved, correct? Was it this week or the week before? It was
This week, 15th? Yes.
They mentioned the trash bins, and I think it was Trustee Brady was discussing enclosing them, and I unfortunately, for some reason, I didn't hear how that was resolved.
Well, the recommendation from the commission allowed it to be either way. The ordinance was approved that way. They can, their plan is to beef up the pad closest to the building and just move them up against the building. If for some reason that doesn't work, they would enclose closer to the street.
Okay. Do they have to enclose them if they're closer to the building?
No, I don't believe so. One of the docks, they end up being pretty far from the street. So the idea was to just pull them away. Right now, they're very close to the street.
Okay, all right, thank you.
As far as I know, I can go back and check the video, but as far as I know, it got approved the way that it was recommended.
Does anyone have an objection to the wood?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
it sounds good to me. The wood enclosures around dumpsters usually look better than cyclone fences, of course, but in this case, all we're doing is hearing about it instead of seeing any kind of representation of
No, I think it wasn't, I don't think it was around a dumpster, it was around the...
Around, where they're going to keep the crates.
Right.
Yeah. So it's going to be very large, and is it going to be a 10-foot high stockade fence? I wouldn't think that would be too attractive.
If you give me a moment, I can.
Treated wood.
Treated wood.
It is treated lumber.
You can get a treated 1x2 or a treated 4x4.
They emailed me a spec of it, actually. If you give me a minute.
Good point.
They are 1x6s with 6x6 posts
Great.
and 2x4 rails.
2x4 rails. Any description on what they're doing with the top? Is it going to be straight across or dog-eared?
It's straight across.
That sounds pretty substantial, and I bet it's going to look better than a cyclone
He said
fence.
dog-eared. The drawing is straight across. We'll confirm. Is there
Oh,
a
you do have
preference one way or the other?
No.
Okay,
Dog-eared?
okay.
I don't have a preference. Sounds pretty
Nor do I.
substantial.
We would work with them. The question that we had for them, just because it is so tall, is just making sure that it holds up to the wind. So we'll just make sure, our own Public Works Department has some experience building a pretty hefty fence, so we'll just make sure that they have enough horizontal rails on it, and that the posts are, 6 by 6 is pretty substantial, so we'll make sure.
Yeah. And some fence designs are more subject to catching more wind, like straight across as opposed to alternating board. It lets some of the wind get through. But, yeah, working with staff on that, it works for me. I'm glad it's going to be a wood enclosure.
Yeah, I think the wood will look a lot nicer, but, you know, if you look at Wheeling Auto, which is basically a storage yard too, something bumps into the fence and you get a lump, and the vinyl's a lot more forgiving than a wood fence will be. I just think the maintenance will, unless you can come up with a method of protecting, you know, with bollards or something.
Okay. That's all I had.
Thank you. With that, do I hear a motion?
So moved.
Motion made and seconded. All those in favor of adjournment?
Aye.
All those opposed?
Aye.
Closed.